What are a few of the worst decisions people will make? Here's definitely a great life lesson. Definitely don't hide in a porta potty. Let's find out. Starting with number 6, the worst hiding place. In Glendale, Wisconsin, a wild police chase ended with some guy in serious need of a shower. It all started when cops tried to stop a stolen white Dodge Durango, which resulted in a chase. The driver, who apparently really didn't want to get arrested, swerved and collided with 2 vehicles before speeding into oncoming traffic. Obviously a good idea. The chaos predictably escalated when the Durango crashed into the highway barrier, forcing the entire crew to exit the vehicle and make a break for it on foot. During the pursuit, one of the suspects ran to the Lincoln Park golf course. No, not Lincoln Park's golf course, the Lincoln Park golf course, where police vehicles blasted across the greens in hot pursuit. But the chase turned into a game of hide and seek, when one of the suspects, determined to dodge arrest, tried to hide out inside an orange porta potty. You can see where this is going. Enter the unlikely heroes, golfers enjoying their leisurely day on the course. With quick thinking and a dash of bravery, one of the golfers spotted the suspect's hideout and devised a cunning plan. In a move worthy of jackass, they tipped the porta potty over, exposing the suspect's hiding spot to the waiting officers. The best part of the story was that one of the golfers said he could hear sloshing around when he knocked the thing over, and the smell was horrendous. Seriously, we've all been in one of those things. It's one thing to hear about it, but absorb that experience for a moment. This dude was hiding in some smelly porta potty that was used over and over. And this guy ended up wearing all of everything like a Halloween costume. Ugh. Moral of the story, it's a bad decision to hide in a porta potty. Number 5, lottery prison. Imran Mohammed was once a pillar of his community, but then he won $10 million in the lottery, and now he'll be spending the next 6 years of his life in prison. But how does someone go from an upstanding member of society, blessed with a stroke of luck, to convicted felon? We mean, other than being an overqualified high school chemistry teacher with some bad luck. Well, it helps if the person already had run-ins with the law. Before Imran walked into a grocery store and bought his winning lottery ticket back in 2017, he had already had 2 encounters with the police. 10 years earlier, he had been arrested because he punched someone at a nightclub. 4 years after that, he was arrested again. This time, he was charged with possession of some of those green plants, contraband paraphernalia, a firearm, and some brass knuckles. So Imran wasn't exactly the Boy Scout his mom described him as. When Imran won the lottery, he asked for it to be paid in a lump sum, which means he took home roughly $5 million. And that is a lot of money, and probably should have been enough for Imran to live healthily after if he invested it wisely and never touched the principal, and avoided getting into trouble with the law. At the ceremony for his win, Imran told the press that he would just buy a house and maybe a sports car and take things easy. However, he did none of those things. Well, he did end up in a bigger house. Just 7 months after winning the lottery, Imran found himself in trouble again. This time, he did a drive-by. Yeah, basically he went looking for trouble. He apparently had ongoing issues with the man, so you'd think that suddenly becoming a multi-millionaire would be enough to make him feel like he won and let his beef go. But not Imran. It was serious enough for him to be charged, but the case was eventually sealed and the victim was granted an order of protection. Not that that mattered to Imran. The first chance he got, he rammed his vehicle into the victim's car and taunted him while brandishing a weapon. He was arrested and sentenced to 5 years probation for that crime. And you'd think that would be the end of it, right? It wasn't. Imran was eventually arrested again for violating the terms of his parole, and he led the police on a high-speed car chase in his minivan of all things, which just leads us to even more questions, before finally surrendering. After his arrest, the police found loads of illegal pharmaceuticals in his van, and he's now looking at 6 years in prison. It was clearly a bad decision for Imran to take the lump sum, since he seemed to spend most of his time making other bad decisions. And hey, as super exciting as it is to suddenly have $5 million, but if he took the annuity like he probably should have, he would have been getting an annual payment of roughly $520,000 a year before taxes. He would still have cash flow for the rest of his life and still never would have to work again, unlike his situation now. Number 4, the entitled mayor. Khalid Kamau, the mayor of South Fulton, Georgia, was arrested on criminal trespass and burglary charges after he was caught in a home he claimed was abandoned. After his arrest, Kamau said that he was only on the property because he thought it was abandoned and he wanted to purchase it, which is a weird thing for anyone, let alone a mayor, to do. If you want to purchase a property, you get in touch with a realtor and get permission to actually view the place. You know, so don't do things such as commit crimes. Apparently, Mr. Mayor didn't learn that in mayor school. While Kamau was walking up the driveway toward the lake house, the actual homeowner received a notification on his phone about someone on his property, and it sounds like it made him a little fussy. This all went down at around 6:45 a.m., so that's not an unreasonable response. Seriously, who's house hunting possibly abandoned houses that early in the morning? That's how you end up dealing with vampires. Anyway, the homeowner, who was at his main house nearby, armed himself and got into his truck. While on the phone with the police dispatcher, the homeowner drove over to the lake house to deal with the situation. Once he got there, he confronted Kamau inside the house with his weapon drawn and ordered him to stay put until the police arrived. But did this mayor stay put like a reasonable person with a firearm trained on them? No, he did not. Instead, he decided to just try and walk away. The homeowner again told him to stay put if he didn't plan on getting some extra breathing holes put in his chest. So then Kamau flips out and shouts at the homeowner, asking him if he knows he's messing with the mayor of South Fulton, as if it's a major world city or something. It's decent size, but hardly big enough for everyone to just know who he is or really care. However, the mayor even thought really highly of his situation and bragged about what he would do when his police officers arrived. So Kamau was super shocked when the police arrived and arrested him. Seriously, what his face must have been like when they put the cuffs on him. Anyway, this case caused a huge scandal, and Kamau was forced to speak to the press while wearing his shiny new bracelets. When asked why he trespassed, he just said he thought the house was abandoned, and then he apologized for his actions. After getting arrested for criminal trespass and first-degree burglary, Kamau ended up getting released on an $11,000 bond. The district attorney's office has since confirmed another investigation into Mayor Kamau, although specific details about his new investigation haven't been disclosed. This comes in addition to the ongoing legal challenges he faces from the city council, including previous allegations of violating the city charter. Despite these challenges, city officials have stated that Kamau will continue to serve as mayor. It's a strange reason to trespass though, right? Especially for a mayor who has access to home records and can easily check records. Not to mention the probability of a nice lake house just being abandoned is probably pretty low. The whole story makes you wonder if there were some additional spices being added to the stew, if you get our drift. Number 3, the reality of fraud. Reality star, and we use both of those terms loosely, Todd Hill has been jailed for running a Ponzi scheme where he embezzled almost $10 million. Hill used to be a part of a reality TV show where he called himself Mr. Flip It because of his stunning ability to, you guessed it, flip it. Well, flip houses, not things. He's not out just flipping things over on TV, though we probably watched that. The show was Flip It to Win It on HGTV and followed the lives of 5 expert home flippers who competed to purchase a home, remodel it, and sell it for a profit. The show only ran for a year, but his appearance on it gave Hill some celebrity status, and he decided to use that status to scam people with a Ponzi scheme, which is never a good idea, especially if you're using your celebrity status to do it. The scheme was simple. Hill told his victims that he would use their capital to remodel and sell homes for a profit. Since he was known as Mr. Flip It, it was a pretty easy sell shoot. We'd probably buy into that too. But instead of using that money to purchase the homes, Hill spent it on luxury items and used them to fund his lavish lifestyle. Hill had to hide the extent of his scam, so he created fake balance sheets and used those same sheets to acquire loans from banks. He would label his luxury purchases as construction costs just to keep the gravy train going a little while longer. One of his victims was scammed out of $6 million, and another saw $250,000 vanish into thin air. Ultimately, Mr. Flip It couldn't flip himself out of this problem, and he was eventually arrested by the police and prosecuted for his crimes. He's been sentenced to 4 years in prison, and he'll pay nearly $10 million in restitution to his victims. He'll also be under probation for 10 years after he's out of prison. It's so dumb for celebrities to run scams too. Being even somewhat known makes them memorable, and if they do get in trouble, judges tend to try and make an example of celebrities. Number 2. Yep, he's the dad. William Boswarva paid his friend to take a DNA test for him and ended up going to jail for 12 months for it. William must have thought his little ruse was so clever, but he didn't account for the tiny, little-known fact that it can easily be proven that the DNA sample wasn't his. Law enforcement literally uses it as evidence because it's so good for identifying people. But why would old William even need someone to take a DNA test for him anyway? Well, William got a woman pregnant after a one-night stand. But then, 9 months later, William wants nothing to do with the love child that came from this fling. However, the baby's mother wasn't going to let this fly by having the baby and immediately applied for child support. And William decided to play it smooth. He came up with a daring plan that he must have thought was pure genius. He sent another guy, his friend, to the medical facility for the DNA test. He even gave the man his driving license and photo ID. So how was the guy able to take the test if his face didn't match the one on Williams's ID? Well, this happened during the pandemic and everyone was mandated to have a mask on. So slick, right? Unfortunately for William, his lie couldn't hold up for long. When he was arrested, he claimed that he was the one who had actually taken the test. But when the police tried to take another DNA sample from him and test against the first test, he refused, of course. So either William had changed all the DNA in his body after that first test using the CRISPR, or he was just lying. More evidence the prosecution used against him in court was that William had pressured the baby's mother to end the pregnancy. Apparently our boy William here wasn't really eager to be a father, if that wasn't obvious. The strangest and best thing about this case is the defense that William's lawyer had for him. He said that William had already committed a lot of crimes since he tried to fraud his way out of his responsibilities, so there's been a lot of water under the bridge. William was eventually sentenced to 12 months in prison. If you're enjoying this video, stay right here to find out how her crime was found out. Number 1. The mismatched ticket. Florida couple Kira Enders and Dakota Jones tried to trick a lottery commission into handing them $1 million in prize money. But their plan didn't work out because it was kind of dumb. And by kind of dumb, we mean completely dumb. The couple somehow found 2 tickets and pieced them together to form one winning ticket. They did it by taking the top half of one authentic ticket and joining with the bottom half of another authentic ticket. The resulting Frankenstein monster of a ticket matched the $1 million prize numbers, and Enders thought that this would be more than enough to trick the Florida Lottery Commission officials. But these dopey forgers forgot a crucial detail. Both parts of the ticket had different serial numbers. This meant that just a cursory check of the ticket's authenticity by lottery officials, which they for sure would do, would definitely reveal the forgery. The fact that the ticket was apparently completely trash also meant that officials had every reason to be suspicious anyway. Enders and Jones, who clearly didn't think this far ahead, went ahead and sent the ticket in anyway, because what if? A few days after they did, they were invited to speak to a local lottery agent concerning their winnings. The couple must have been stoked, thinking that their scam actually worked. Enders said she even made all these plans to open a salon with her winnings. That's how convinced she was that this was going to work. But once they arrived, they were taken into custody and interviewed separately. Enders and Clyde weren't prepared for this grilling at all, and they ended up telling very different stories about how they found the ticket. Enders said the ticket fell out of her car and then it got rained on, and then she tried to scratch it before it tried and then it tore. Then she tried to piece it back together, and that was why the ticket looked pieced together. When she was asked about the different serial numbers, she claimed that it wasn't taped together properly and that was why they were different. She was probably very proud of that lie. Jones, on the other hand, had a totally different story. He said that they found 2 halves of a wet ticket walking down the road and then tried to piece them together. Then Jones was told by officials that the serial numbers on the top and bottom half didn't match, and he was like, what? However, he eventually admitted that Enders knew the numbers didn't match, but insisted that they thought it was real when they supposedly found it. Anyway, as of this video, the case is still ongoing. Both of them now have the chance to get their story straight, as they're both facing serious charges and will be going to court. You'd think that they would have at least discussed what their story was going to be on the way to the commission's office. Crimes are always more fun when the criminals aren't the brightest bulbs in the pack. Let's buckle up for this one and start with number 6. Don't mind if I do. Mary Ellis Valencia Martinez stole about $32,000 worth of jewels from a man she visited in Miami. Martinez flew to meet the man after they had spoken online for about 2 months. Martinez first noticed the man's jewels when he put 2 diamond rings and a diamond bracelet in a clear plastic bag as they were parking his car. Apparently, there was a sign suggesting that people shouldn't leave their valuables in their car, so, of course, he couldn't be leaving diamond rings and diamond bracelets, you know? Especially if he wasn't planning on wearing them. And it's not like he could just leave them at home or something. Doesn't everyone just drive around with thousands of dollars in jewelry they're not wearing? Anyway, during the date, Martinez asked the guy if she could wear the jewelry and wanted to know how much it was worth and how much it would sell for, because questions like that aren't suspicious at all. The guy didn't tell her any details concerning the price, but allowed her to wear the jewelry anyway. The two of them went to a nightclub and returned home where Martinez gave it all back. The guy took the rings and the bracelet and placed them in a box on the shelf in his room. Early the next morning, Martinez woke the guy up and asked him to take her back to the airport, which he did. Before leaving the hotel, he saw the box on the shelf and assumed the jewels were still in it. Unbeknownst to him, Martinez had done a little creative housekeeping, and by creative housekeeping we mean she stole the jewels. A few days later, the guy saw her using the jewels to record videos on TikTok. It must have took him a few days to notice his diamonds were stolen. He texted her through WhatsApp and asked her to send them back. Martinez refused and told him that she would send them back whenever she returned to Miami. Her excuse was that it was too expensive to send them back, which is a pretty good excuse if you're 5 years old. However, Martinez didn't return to Miami at the time she promised she would. But when she did return, she was arrested. The guy reported her to authorities, so they had been on the lookout. Once she flew into Fort Lauderdale, her goose was cooked. Unfortunately, we don't know if this arrest will result in the victim getting his jewelry back. Maybe don't bring expensive jewelry you're not wearing on your next date, huh? Number 5, double check the insurance. Uloma Curry Walker hired teenagers to bump off her husband because she wanted to benefit from his life insurance. She was married to Fire Department Lieutenant William Walker for just 4 months. It must have been bliss, since she was already planning to end the marriage by becoming a widow and inheriting everything he had. Uloma was thousands of dollars in debt and was nearing financial ruin. William didn't know about this debt, and he also didn't know that Uloma wasn't actually suffering from the stage 4 breast cancer she'd claimed to have, but he was figuring it out. So, what did our enterprising future widow-in-chief do to get her husband bumped off? She did what any reasonable person would have done. She spoke to her 17-year-old daughter. Her daughter then told her 20-year-old boyfriend, Chad Paget, about it. Paget told Uloma that he could get the job done, but he needed some payment. She decided to pay him $1,000 up front and said she would pay him the rest after the job was completed. However, the 20-year-old Paget surprisingly wasn't exactly accomplished at what he was hired to do, so he decided to farm the job out to another guy named Chris Hine. Hine initially accepted the job, but then brought in yet another co-conspirator, Ryan Doherty. This co-conspirator seemed to be the most willing to do the job, and he only asked for a meager fee of $800. The reason Uloma hired the boys to do the job was because she thought nobody would think she did it, because who in their right mind would think she'd hire a bunch of actual kids to go after her husband? In any case, the deed was eventually done. Doherty fatally ambushed William as he went out to get his fake cancer-having wife fast food. Uloma, who must have a huge hole in the place where her conscience lives, rode with William in the ambulance as he was transported to the hospital. Uloma's big plan was to get William's life insurance benefits, but had overlooked a tiny detail. She wasn't the beneficiary of the life insurance. Instead, William's ex-wife was the beneficiary. For some reason, William hadn't gotten around to changing the name on the benefits from his ex-wife to his new wife, probably because he wasn't expecting his new wife to plan his demise. Not only did Uloma not get the life insurance money, but she also got arrested by the police. The police offered plea deals to Uloma's co-conspirators, and they took it. Even if her daughter testified against her at trial, in return for the plea deals, Hine, Paget, and Doherty all got reduced life sentences. Uloma, on the other hand, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But she's single, right? What a catch. Number 4. Caught on camera. Haley Barlow reported to her insurance company that her car had been stolen. But what she left out of the report was that she was the one who towed it away and then set it on fire. Barlow told the police that she'd woken up one morning and discovered that her car keys had been stolen and her car was nowhere to be found. She then went on to make a $2,000 claim for the apparent theft. But things quickly turned into a junkyard fire for Barlow. The police found the car and discovered that it had been set alight. Then they found out that the burnt car didn't have an engine. They returned to Barlow, who insisted that the car was in its proper working condition before it was stolen. Honestly, promise. Unfortunately for her, that claim wasn't enough to keep those pesky coppers from snooping around, sticking their noses in everyone's business. The police eventually found CCTV footage that showed the car being towed by a tow truck with Barlow sitting right inside it. This was all the evidence needed to prove that our little victim was actually an arsonist fraudster. Further investigations revealed that Barlow had paid the driver of the tow truck about 20 pounds. After the car was towed to another location, she then used a can of butane gas to set the vehicle on fire. Barlow was eventually arrested and charged. She pleaded guilty to fraud and claimed that she had carried out the scam because of debts and the amount of money and repairs the car was costing her. Therefore, she saw setting the car on fire and getting insurance funds for it as her only option. Police said that the actions of people like Barlow weren't only criminal, but also constituted a wildfire risk. The fire from her vehicle had caught the dry undergrowth on the road, and the fire had spread a considerable distance away from the car. Thankfully, it went out before it had the chance to spread to the farms and fields nearby. You were driving a VW, Haley. You probably could have just waited a few more days and it would have caught fire on its own. Number 3, not seeing the problem. A supposedly blind Italian man scammed the government of thousands of euros in benefits before he was caught window shopping and driving. Our lovable fake blind man got about 144,000 euros over 13 years from the Italian government with a fake sob story. He claimed that he became blind in 2008 due to a congenital problem. Unfortunately for our blind guy, and perhaps fortunately for the Italian government, he just couldn't keep this lie going for long. 10 years after he declared blindness, he decided to apply for a driver's license. This alerted the police, who decided to check in on him. They don't typically like blind people driving because it's dangerous or whatever. So either he'd suddenly gotten cured of his blindness because the thoughts and prayers finally worked, or he was just a careless liar. As it turned out, he was just a careless liar, even though our money was on the thoughts and prayers working. The police staked out his apartment and saw him riding a scooter. They also saw him doing things that blind people generally find time to do, such as driving a car, looking at your phone while driving, looking at shop windows, and teaching a child how to ride a bike. Incidentally, the blind man wasn't unknown to the police. He had only recently received a jail sentence of nearly 15 years for being part of a group that staged fake traffic accidents for insurance payouts, which again is the sort of thing you would expect the blind man to do. Lastly, the police discovered that the man was already financially stable as he owned a garage. Despite that, he still collected a basic income that the authorities only give its poorest citizens. We can't really hate on a guy pretending to be blind. We pretend to be deaf all the time. Please stop playing with the dinosaur bones. This is a museum. What? Number 2, double dipping. Marina Golfo tricked her bosses at the City Department of Education into giving her 3 months of sick leave while she served time in prison for defrauding taxpayers and students. While she was in prison, Marina was paid over $24,000 by the Department of Education. Her journey to conviction and imprisonment began when she defrauded taxpayers of over $150,000 through a program that served developmentally challenged children. For 3 years, Marina submitted forged treatment notes and invoices to the program claiming payment for over 1,500 therapy sessions she never actually provided. But the program eventually found out what Marina was doing, and she was arrested and sentenced to 3 months in prison. She was also asked to pay restitution for all the money she'd collected from the program. But our scammer wasn't about to go gently into that good night. She had one more trick up her sleeve. Once in prison, Marina sent a letter to the Department of Education asking for paid sick leave. She included a doctor's note in her request claiming that she was too sick to come to work and should remain at home. After that, she submitted requests to prison and court officials asking for compassionate release before her time in prison was served. Her reason was the COVID-19 pandemic and her elderly parents needed a caretaker. The court refused and said her arguments didn't hold up. At the same time, Marina's requested time for sick paid leave was coming to an end. So she did the smart thing and requested more sick leave, and the department approved the request. They had no idea that Marina was a jailbird and not a sick bird. And it gets even better. The Department of Education initially knew of Marina's arrest. The arrest was widely reported, and she had even been reassigned from her primary position in the department in anticipation of her sentencing. When Marina was eventually sentenced, she simply informed no one, and no one bothered to check. The Human Resources Division of the department had no idea that Marina was requesting sick leave from jail, so they granted it. But this gig couldn't go on for long. After Marina served her time in prison, someone who wasn't minding their own business informed the department about her stint in prison, and she was eventually fired. According to Marina, she had done absolutely nothing wrong. She claimed that while in prison, she suffered complications from shingles, so she would have been unable to go to work even if she hadn't been in prison. So her request for sick leave was valid since she wouldn't have been able to go to work anyway. What a coincidence! However, it doesn't seem like Marina will get away with her scam, as the Department of Education has requested a refund of all the monies it paid out. She has also been banned from doing any further work for the department. Looks like Marina taught her last lesson. Just because you're accurate doesn't mean you're right. Number 1. Grandma and the BBL. Tiffany Acuna stands accused of using the credit card of an Alzheimer's patient to pay for her cosmetic surgery. When the theft occurred, Tiffany worked as a certified nursing assistant and was tending to an 88-year-old. The fraud itself was simple. Tiffany merely took the credit card information of her patient and used it to purchase a Brazilian butt lift, J-plasma, and arm lipo procedures. The husband of the victim in this case contacted the fraud department of his bank when he received a bill for over $7,000 in his wife's name. The department told him that the bill was for cosmetic surgery. He didn't believe his 88-year-old wife would be getting a Brazilian butt lift, so he immediately knew something was wrong, and he probably was also a little disappointed. The victim's husband then contacted the agency that Tiffany worked for, and she was immediately fired. But that was only the first of her headaches. Tiffany contacted the victim's husband to set up a repayment plan. She wanted to sign a loan agreement that would mandate her to pay $1,000 monthly. She might have done this because she was in nursing school and wanted to avoid criminal charges. Unfortunately for her, the police weren't having any of that. They went to the victim's house and waited for Tiffany to show up. When the nursing scammer arrived with $1,500 in cash and a loan repayment agreement, she was ambushed by the police, who took her into custody. With all those cosmetic surgeries, there's probably a couple online careers you'll be able to fall back on, Tiffany. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section what you'd rather do. Eat 0 animal products for 6 months or eat only animal products for 6 months.